The police obviously are sparing no efforts to try to catch the man or men responsible for at least 8 sex attacks in Clifton since spring of last year.
They were very nasty attacks.
He was going to attack again. He probably would have continued attacking until he got caught.
There was quite a lot, obviously, pressure on the police force to catch him.
We were desperate to try and apprehend the person that was causing all this.
I would draw your attention to the latest photo fit, which has been prepared.
He could have murdered somebody.
We tried overt policing, we tried covert policing.
There was the need for us to do something rather special.
We were asked if we'd like to volunteer if they've got this operation going on.
I always thought that if he did come after me, I could run out of his reach.
It must have cost a fortune.
As the days went by, you started to feel, this blighter's not here, he's not taking the bait.
Those in charge obviously were thinking it's time to pull it.
For 10 weeks in 1979, Bristol police had been coordinating Operation Argus, running young female decoy operatives to try to catch the Clifton Rapist who'd been terrorising the city.
This is the photo fit picture of the actual attacker.
But the attacker had gone to ground. He'd neither attacked the female officers nor any other women in Bristol.
The operation was running as we wanted it to, but clearly as time went on and as the days went by, you started to feel, this blighter's not here, he's not taking the bait.
We weren't getting the results. And I think I did know that at the time, and we thought this obviously isn't going to work. So those in charge obviously were thinking it's time to pull it.
Operation Argus was expensive. Every night there were 2 decoys, at least 10 observation officers, backup in vans and further support via radio link in the office. But the Clifton Rapist hadn't appeared once. This couldn't go on.
Well, it was huge manpower, and most of those hours were overtime. It must have cost a fortune.
To make matters worse, the 1970s state-of-the-art technical equipment was failing.
The radios didn't work one night, so everybody came out of the bushes and said, is your radio working? Is your radio working?
Comms was always an issue then, you know, it was very basic stuff.
Unfortunately, somebody had pulled the plug out by accident.
So with everything seemingly going wrong, the decoys knew their time was nearly up. On March the 22nd, 1979, the curtain was to close on Operation Argus. This was to be the last chance, one final night.
It's quite cold. I was just dropped off at the bottom of St Paul's Road at the traffic lights.
The team would focus again on the dark streets around White Ladies Road in the Clifton and Redland areas of Bristol, where the attacks had all taken place.
On this last run, it's still very clear in my mind. Michelle got out the car, walked away from the car, and as she walked away from the car, I can still see it now, Ford Capri came round the corner from White Ladies Road into St Paul's Road, and the driver immediately slowed, and I saw him look towards Michelle.
So I'm walking up White Ladies Road on my own, and I didn't see him at all.
As he went past, I could see that this guy fitted the identikit.
He looked just like the attacker, looked like the man you were after.
He did a U-turn behind our car and then pulled in literally a few yards in front of us, so I could then get his number plate. Michelle then turned left. He drove to the traffic lights and turned left. I thought, this is him, we've got him. We've got a number plate. I'd radioed that in.
And that's when I was told somebody's paying attention to me. You know, it was like, oh, there's a car interested in Michelle.
I could see her way up ahead, and I then whipped round the back. I was so concerned in my own mind, we had to get this guy. I could hear the handover, and by now the CID officers could also see the car. And they were watching him, and they were saying, he's slowing down, he's slowing down.
And I heard them say, he's pulled up, he's got out the car, he's following Michelle on foot. So I carried on walking, and then I I could have said there and then, no, I don't want to do this anymore.
We had a radio message back to say that the vehicle was registered to a man called Evans who was out on life licence for murder and rape.
Once they had said, attention, this man is on life licence for murder, got previous convictions for rape, then I was frightened. You know, I was...
That puts your senses, heightens your senses, and without a doubt, everybody was on tender hooks.
He's now out of the car and running after her.
I thought, oh, right, okay, keep walking, keep walking.
Your blood pressure goes up a little bit then because you suddenly think, is this him? Is he going to attack? We need the evidence to arrest him. He might look like the identikit, but we don't know yet.
The guy was walking behind her. He's quickening his step. He's getting closer. He's getting closer. So as the sort of tension was building and building and building.
I could hear him, and whilst I could hear his footsteps, I thought, that's all right, he's behind me, he's behind me. And I carried on walking, and then I couldn't hear him anymore.
To actually be walking, knowing that you've got a killer on your track behind you, I mean, it doesn't get any more real and any more scary than that.
And I thought, all I had in my mind is I've got to get under a street lamp. Get under a street light so you can be seen.
Incredibly brave person to know that you probably had somebody who was likely to cause an attack.
I stopped under the street light, turned round, and there he was behind me, and I thought, that's him, that's a photo fit, that is identical to him. And I thought, what's going to happen now?
Things happen so quickly, but actually, when you reflect, they are rather slow.
He then was staring straight past me, and I thought, oh, he's not interested, you know, he's going to walk straight on. He then grabbed me from behind, round the throat, round the arm, the waist, and said, don't scream, I'll kill you, and started to pull me backwards.
I saw him bundle her into the alleyway, and then she was lost to sight.
That image will stay with me, his face will stay with me forever. I can turn and look over my shoulder and see it, even after 40-odd years.
And then I heard my officers say, he's on her, he's attacked her.
And he hit me, as he hit me to run away, sort of pushed me out the way, hit me in the face. And I said, don't let him get away, don't let him get away.
There was that moment where there wasn't anybody else there except me. And of course, Michelle was still in the garden there, probably trying to cope with what had just happened. And literally, he ran right at me. And I did one of those sort of grabbed rugby tackles on him. And we landed in the middle of the road.
And then the next message was, we've got him, he's on the floor.
And Kelvin drove his car down and he skidded to a halt, and he must have stopped about an inch from my head. I literally was under the wheels of the car, and I thought I was going to get run over.
There was a feeling of elation, but then a feeling of, let's deal with this properly. If we've got the right man, we've got to make sure we've got all the evidence right, that everybody can recount now exactly what they've done over the last half an hour to ensure that the evidence is going to be right.
It was just the elation that we'd actually got somebody attacking, tragically attacking Michelle, and that Michelle was safe and well, because, you know, she must have been traumatised by that incident.
There was no, how do you feel about this afterwards? No. Or, I think you should have some counselling. There was no such thing as that.
I think we all wondered, you know, wanted to know the story, wanted to know all the details about it, and who it was and which one of us it was, and how they got him and who he was.
We had a copy of the identikit with us. They had him face down on the floor, and when they turned him over, I thought, we've got you.
In these early stages, they had just his name and criminal record. Ronald Evans, convicted murderer.
But who actually was this man who'd attacked 7 women in nearly 2 years, who'd struck fear into Bristol, and who'd prompted this groundbreaking covert operation?
Evans was a 38-year-old electrician who lived on the outskirts of Bristol. He was married. He was a family man. In 1963, Evans had raped and murdered a 21-year-old, Kathleen Heathcote, in Nottinghamshire.
Evans had been sentenced to life in prison, but in 1975 he'd been released on life licence.
He would be working in somewhere down at Avonmouth with a bunch of blokes. He had a wife, and occasionally he would want to go out and attack a woman.
Few of Evans's friends here knew about his past, that he'd killed a woman years before he'd been sentenced to life in prison. He'd served 11 years and he'd been moved to an open prison near Bristol, and he'd made the city his home when he'd been released. He was released on so-called life licence. Now, that meant he had to live by certain conditions. Instead, he used his newfound freedom to attack women, to become the Clifton Rapist.
People are allowed out on parole, and the assumption is that the parole board have made the right decision to allow them out. Clearly, on this occasion, this particular individual was intent on carrying out to commit similar crimes.
When you found out he was a murderer, and when you found out what he had done to a woman back in 1963...
It was a shock. It was shocking. Yeah, it was a total shock. And how he could have moved without us knowing about him. That was the biggest letdown, I suppose, the biggest shock. And that is a failing, I think, of the system. And it was a failure for all those women who got attacked, because it could have been avoided.
You can't make this up. It's scary to think that we were that close to a killer, and potentially the risks were extraordinarily high. And, you know, Michelle was an extraordinarily brave person, as were the other policewomen that put themselves out there. It's just extraordinarily brave.
When he was caught, we were all just so relieved and just so glad that we'd done it and it had all been worthwhile.
In 1979, here at Bristol Crown Court, Ronald Evans pleaded guilty to 5 counts of sexual assault. The 2 more serious attacks on Grove Road and Parry's Lane were dropped.
Evans was sentenced to 9 years in prison and his life licence was revoked. And it was only now, with a judge's commendation, that journalists heard about the top-secret Operation Argus. Each of the decoys received a Chief Constable's commendation, and Michelle received a Queen's commendation for bravery.
So now you've got the Queen's commendation. How do you feel about that?
Very surprised, because I didn't know anything about it until yesterday.
It was all in the papers and my picture was taken, and it was a lot of press, and I was interviewed. And I lasted a few days, and then back to work. And when I walked up at Southmead, oh, what's that? That's that policewoman. And it was quite nice, actually.
Looking back on it, yeah, I'm really, really proud of what we did, but I wouldn't do it again.
Ronald Evans returned to prison, but there was unfinished business. 2 of his victims hadn't seen justice.
Next time, a cold case team links Ronald Evans to the 2 unsolved attacks from the 1970s.
It was decided that we needed to review any stranger rape offence to see whether or not forensic science could be used to identify offenders.
Ronald Evans, back in the 70s, when he went to court, thought that he'd got away with those offences he wasn't charged and convicted of. With the advent of DNA, his past caught up with him,